views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of Time Warner Cable.
Hi and welcome. My name is Dana Connors. It's my pleasure to welcome you to The Bottom Line, a monthly program brought to you by the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. And each month we take a look at some of the issues and the policies at play in our state, helping to improve the lives as well as the livelihood of Maine people. And that's why it's called The Bottom Line. Today we're going to take a look at the 127th session of the legislature. It is the first year of a two-year session, and yet we have yet to complete this year. So we're recording this before the end of the session, and what remains is the governor's action on the budget that has been approved by the legislature, a few more vetoes, the bond issues, and in fact, some of those vetoes may not happen until the middle of July. But there's a lot to talk about that's already occurred in these first 6 months. And with me today to help us do just that is our own legislative advocacy team at the State Chamber of Commerce. You've met them before, but for purposes of identity, Ben Gilman on my left, Linda Caprera, and Peter Gore. They each have their own area of specialty, if you will, but they act together as a team. For example, Ben has a responsibility specifically within energy, utilities, the environment, and yes, education. Linda has the enviable task of watching the appropriations at work, as well as taxation. And Peter, our Vice President of Advocacy, looks at those economic issues and those human resource needs that are fundamental to a healthy economy. Welcome, guys and gal.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you with me today, as always, and look forward to our discussion. This has been unrehearsed, so I'm anxious to hear what you have to say, as well as the audience, I hope. I want to break our conversations into two parts, or the program into two parts. I want to talk a bit about the personality of this session and then talking about the policy. The personality is important, not because it's of entertainment value, but clearly it helps to express how things gets done. What's the dynamic of each session? Does the problem exist between the two parties, between the second floor and the third floor, in other words, the governor and the legislature? And we know that personality, if you will, has an impact on what gets done or how it gets done. We also know that policy is very difficult. Debate takes place as well as it should. And we also know that no two sessions are ever alike. So how would you characterize? I'm going to ask each of you to answer the question, but also play off from each other's questions. How would you describe the personality of this session that we're just about to complete? Peter, let's start with you.
Well, I think amongst the lobby, it's no secret that the 126th session, the legislature from 2 years ago, was a difficult session to deal with, and you had some pretty dynamic changes in part of it was you had an election year and a gubernatorial year, and that brought its own sense of issues. But you have divided legislature in the 127th. D's controlled the House, R's controlled the Senate. You had a lot of new legislators from both parties. So some people might think that would set it up for continued controversy and conflict. I think that's just the opposite. I saw a profound change between the 127th and the 126th legislatures in terms of the willingness of legislators from both sides of the aisle to talk to each other, to have relationships that were, that could, surpass the political differences. It was really a love is love and business is business kind of dynamics over there, where you could set political differences aside and still eat lunch together in the State House cafeteria. And people joke about that, but that didn't happen two years ago. And that's important for legislators to develop their own relationships that help them get past the politics of the issues, to perhaps succeed in successful policy.
I mean, I saw that in some of in my committee, the one I follow. Folks were genuinely willing to work together on issues that in the past you've seen some outbursts in committee. You didn't see that this session. You saw, a willingness to work towards a common goal or, common, interest. So I think I saw a lot of that, at least in the committee I follow.
I agree with that. I think at the committee level, I think there's a lot of good working relationships. The committees that I followed, I saw that a lot. But I think it did change a bit when things went to the floor and leadership got involved in terms of bills as they went to the floor. I think it got a little more political, especially towards the end of the session. I mean, the budget obviously was one piece of it, but I think I agree in terms of working relationship with legislators. I think they really tried hard, but I do believe that towards the end of the session we saw, as things went to the floor, when leadership had to come in and we saw more divided reports and more partisan votes, that did diverge a little bit towards the end of the session.
I think the rank and file was able to get past the different political differences in particular. But I don't want to be Pollyanna about this either. I mean, we had a record number of divided reports that came out of the different joint standing committees.
And where was the conflict in all of that? I mean, you talked about the great relationship, the meaningful things that got done. You started down the path of divided reports, which suggests, as you expect there to be, in debates, in legislation, you want there to be debates, you want there to be conflict, so long as it's about policy and not personality. Where was the conflict this year?
Well, I think in my committees, it was the committees that I follow. They were policy conflicts. They didn't agree on the policy positions that on a lot of the major policy positions. In part because we've talked about this. We had a lot of do-over bills, and I know we're going to talk about that more later on. But we revisited a lot of issues that were polarizing in the 126, and we did them over again in the 127th. They weren't as mean-spirited when it came to the committee of the debate work from the 126, but we still had to go through that process again.
I agree. I mean, I think it was some fundamental policy differences that you saw, whether it be party line or just issue.
Right.
In the natural resources area, I think it was very clear, the mining issue. It was a bipartisan bill that came out of committee. There were a lot of disagreements. There were people that just simply did not agree with mining, but they dealt with it in a very, good fashion. They debated the bill. It was a healthy debate, and it came out of the committee in a bipartisan fashion. We'll talk about the end result of that bill in the end, but it was the fundamental policy differences, I think, ended up in the divided reports. A lot of them sometimes come from, the different parties, but also it could be just an environmental issue from someone's perspective of different areas of the state they came from.
I mean, I agree, there were policy differences, but I think overriding all of that, you had some major issues that related to the budget, that folks really, they were kind of out there. You had the welfare reform, you had the income tax, you had a lot of different issues that kind of overshadowed some of this. I mean, in taxation, we didn't have a lot of divided reports. We had some redos that we've seen before. But some of the bills that they dealt with, they just kind of agreed that they weren't going to agree on this, and they weren't going to send it upstairs. So they just kind of, they died in committee, some of them.
So a lot of the conflict that we had the occasion to read about and to see was really between the administration and the legislature. It was the second floor, the third floor. I mean, that seemed to be where the conflict was? Because all three are reinforcing the essence of good, healthy debate, discussion, policy conflict as it relates to the legislature. Every day we read something in terms of the war of the State House, the Capitol.
Well, but I think there was some fundamental differences between the parties at the end, like I just said, on some of those major issues. I think, they took months to negotiate the budget, months, and so it was, but there was certainly some.
There's no question that the uniting force for legislators was the governor's office.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, that definitely happened.
Right.
But I also think that, I heard a lot of legislators this time around when an issue would come up of a divided report in either of the bodies. It's, look, we can count noses as well as everybody else, and we know that it's passed here, but it's going to die there. So a lot of legislators just said, let's not bother with an hour of debate on this issue. I'll speak, you speak, and then we'll be done with it. Yeah. And
I think you can't ignore the fact the number of vetoes we had this legislative session, number that have been overridden.
Right.
And that was the legislature, a lot of them overridden by unanimous votes in both bodies. Whether it be the 64 line items in the budget and numerous other bills. That shows you it's the second floor, the governor's office versus the legislature, more so than a partisan issue. Sure, those are feathered in there, a few here and there, but of the 100+ vetoes, I'd say a vast majority were overridden by bipartisan nature.
Yeah,
So.
I want to move on to the policy. This is intriguing and it's important to speak of because sometimes, as we all know, perception is not reality. And every session is, when you look at each session, you're looking at each session. There's no two alike. And each has their own personality and each have incredible value in terms of getting things done. Policy. I want to begin this and complete it next session. But let me set it up this way, is that we came into this session with high hopes and great expectations. There was the promise there that was founded in not just coming off an election in which people were feeling really good and wanting to make a difference. We had a governor that put forward a very strong initiative on tax reform, one that we'd not seen a governor do in the past. Workforce challenge that we all wanted to tackle. With that comes an emphasis on education. We know that mining had finally been positioned by its regulations to hopefully move forward. We had broadband, high speed teed up, and that's just mentioning 4 or 5. When you look back on this session, using those or other issues that were teed up, offering promise, how did we do? Ben, how did we do?
I mean, from my perspective, it was a little bit of a mixed bag. I think one of the real positives of this session was education in terms of the work the Education Committee did. They worked very well together. This session they came into, there was a lot of movement to change. We set some standards in place for education here in the state of Maine about 5 years ago. And we're coming up on some deadlines, some benchmarks to meet, along with this testing that goes along with that. And there was a lot of pressure on the committee to move the goalpost in the middle of the game, change the standards, and they held firm. They stayed the course at the urging of the Chamber of Commerce, along with the Principals Association, the Maine School Management Association, a number of other groups, Educate Maine. And this committee, even though there were 30-plus bills dealing with this subject matter, to change the standards or repeal the standards, they decided to stay the course. And that's a very important issue for the business community, as we're the number one consumers of the public education system. That's our future workforce, big issue for us. Yeah. And it was a real positive out of this legislative session, I think, for them to stay the course in terms of standards for our students as they move forward, make sure we have a positive workforce, for years to come. So that was one.
I'm going to hold right there because we need to take a break. We'll be right back to continue the discussion on looking back on the first year of the 127th. Welcome back. I have with me today my 3 advocacy team, and we're taking a look back to the first year of the 127th. We begin the discussion with Ben, and now I'm going to follow it up with Linda. Linda, as you look at this session, have we been hitting home runs, singles, or leaving a lot of people on base as we think of it in terms of baseball?
I mean, I think we have hit a couple home runs, particularly in the budget with the Better Program, Business Equipment Tax Reimbursement Program. I think that was very important for businesses around the state, and this year they fully funded it. So, thank you to legislators for that. I think that was well intended. It was a mixed bag. I mean, it's kind of one of those sessions where there wasn't a lot. There was tax reform, which is the major piece, but inside the committee, it was kind of everything centered around that. So we didn't, the OPEGA study, review of tax expenditures.
We'll talk about that more.
Yeah.
Pete, pick up the action. How do you see the first year?
Well, you really see the effects of divided government. House R, Senate D, House D, Senate R. If there was issues that they couldn't agree on, they just died between the bodies. So in terms of defensive work, the work that we often find ourselves doing, it was relatively easy because you knew most things weren't going to get out of the Senate if it was a problem.
I'll let our members hear it and say it was easy.
Well, that's the nature of divided government.
Right, yeah. Easier.
But, and that also meant that if legislation actually passed, that there was agreement, that they found commonality around a certain policy issue and allowed it to become law, or at least sent it to the governor's desk, and the governor decided if it was going to become law or not. Even then, with the vetoes, as Ben referred to earlier, most of those vetoes that are coming to the legislature at this point in the session are being unanimously overridden.
Yeah, let's go here. I'm going to ask each of you to pick one issue that you worked on that you were proud of in terms of how it set up success in the economy or helped people's lives. And then I'm going to turn that issue around and say, what was the issue that you worked on that you saw hope but was disappointed in its outcome? Linda, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I mean, I think the budget, the budget itself, I think through the appropriations process, like I just mentioned, the Better program. I think the Better program, we really worked that very positively through the session and really, I think, instill in legislators how important that program is to investment in the state and the BED program. So I think the fact that they fully funded that program, I think, was a positive thing. The other thing I would add, the OPEGA study, review of tax expenditures. We worked very closely with the committee to set up a process where they can review the expenditures that are on the books, the business tax programs. And I think that's a good thing because we know that they're working in the state of Maine. We know they're helping businesses stay competitive. So I think that's really important. And we have a process, and that's on appropriations table, and hopefully it will pass. But it is set up so that there's stakeholder input. They do it in a positive way where they look at the aggregate data, and so I think that's a positive thing.
Yeah, the programs are predictable and they're justified.
Exactly.
So, Pete, pick it up there.
I have to reach a little bit. I mean, I ended up having a large amount of the do-over phenomenon in the committees that I was sitting in on. And I guess that's sort of the bad news. The bad news is I can't point to anything that's particularly glowing that was a success. The changes that were made in workers' comp are a good thing, and they were unanimously agreed upon by Rs and Ds. But it's so technical in nature that unless you're a practitioner, it really wouldn't impact the average business. I guess on the positive side, though, that I think legislators were much more open to our arguments around bills, whether they were good or whether they were bad. Bad legislation didn't pass. A lot of the do-overs that were, of a negative in nature never made it out of the Senate. Some didn't get out of the House. So from that respect, trying to tee it up in more of the positive light, that's as good as I can do.
For those watching, do-overs mean we already defeated them or dealt with them in the previous legislature, but they've come back another day. So that's an inside term. Ben?
I spoke about education earlier. I definitely think that was a positive, staying the course in education. I think the other positive that came out of this legislature surrounded broadband and our broadband policy here in the state of Maine. This is a big policy discussion going on before the Energy and Utilities Committee. There were like 36 bills dealing with the age-old question of government-owned utility versus private industry building out our broadband network. And this is a significant policy that's going to impact Maine for decades to come. And the committee, I think, did the right thing. They said, okay, we need more information on this. This is going to, bind us as a state, like I said, for decades. So they took all those bills and kind of put them on the shelf or, killed them off and took one bill and said, okay, let's have a report back next legislature. Let's find out what we have inventory here in the state, what we have for broadband, where it exists, and then let's have this policy discussion in the second legislature. That was a very positive outcome because they could have been rash and jumped to conclusions, I think, without all the information. And so I'm really looking forward to, in the second legislative session, looking at the broadband policy here in the state of Maine, because as we know, we live in a global economy, and this is a very important issue for Maine's business community.
Yeah, good intentions still need good homework, and that's essentially what's at play here. Talk about your disappointment. Pete, start with you.
This may sound strange coming from the State Chamber of Commerce, but I was disappointed in the outcome around the minimum wage issue. We made no mistake about our concern with a referendum-driven increase in the minimum wage. We let it be known to the legislature and the LCRAG committee that we were open to a discussion around seeing a minimum wage increase in Maine in an effort to offset that argument of a $12 an hour minimum wage through a referendum question. At the end of the day, I think that there were enough votes in the House and the Senate to pass a minimum wage increase and avoid the conflict that's going to come in 2016. Unfortunately, they couldn't agree on what that looked like, and so we ended up with nothing happening. And I think that probably next session we will revisit this issue again, and perhaps we'll have a different outcome. But it is a very volatile question, and even the business community, with all the concern they have about a referendum-driven minimum wage, is divided on that question.
Yeah. Ben?
No question, the mining regulations that were defeated this legislative session. Started out very promising in this session. One of the number one economic opportunities for the state of Maine. One specific site in northern Maine could be up to 700 direct and indirect jobs, $120 million in local taxes. And the Natural Resources Committee tackled the mining rules, spent over 50 hours on it. Reported out a bipartisan bill. I had Representative Bob Duchesne on the ought to pass of adoption of the mining rules, and they headed to the full legislature for adoption. Unfortunately, at that time, I think they got caught up in a lot of politics that were going on the floor, and then some misunderstanding about the rules that were adopted. The fact is, even at the adoption of these mining rules, they still would have been the most stringent in the country. And so it was a disappointment. I think we lost an economic opportunity. I hope in the future we still have that opportunity. But based on this legislative session, I don't know if that's the case. So that was a high disappointment. This legislature, it was promising at the beginning. I thought they could come together, and unfortunately they could not.
Definitely a lost opportunity.
Talking about a redo. Tax havens. I mean, we've seen this bill before. Unfortunately, it came back this year, this session, and really what that bill would have done was designate certain countries around the globe as tax havens. So if Maine companies operate in those countries, they would be subject to not only taxation in those countries, but also Maine taxation on top of that income.
Double taxation.
Double
in other words.
taxation. A huge, you know.
The policy today is you operate at
In the water's edge. We operate according to our waters. These are negotiated by federal tax treaties that are in place with these countries all around the globe. And unfortunately, this bill came back, and it sends a negative message. It really does. You know, anti-business. We got calls from all over the U.S. on this bill saying, "What's Maine doing on this?" So I think, you know, thankfully the legislature did end up killing this bill, and I think it was a good thing.
Yeah.
But again, we saw it as a redo.
Well, shamefully, for our purposes, we're running out of time, but we didn't talk about the tax reform measure. It was vastly different than what the governor proposed, but it still lowered our individual income tax. It still added dollars to GPA education purposes. It addressed the revenue sharing issue. It dealt with the estate tax, increased at the federal level. It did some promising things, I think.
Homestead exemption.
Homestead
increased the-
exemption, exactly. But we also found that there were issues surrounding when they took away the deductibles, then that has to be evaluated by every individual and
it
every
does.
business that files as an individual taxpayer. That's an issue that time would tell. But they went in the right direction, and we still have bonds, and we have a big request for bonds, and we have little time left. It's important that we continue to look at those investments in transportation, R&D, housing, the issues that are so strong to our economy. But for the time left, I want to turn my attention and to acknowledge, as each of us here at the State Chamber know, that legislative work is serious work, and that the bills that are passed and the actions that are taken affect you, your lives, and your livelihood. We've just talked about some of the issues, clearly not all of the issues that were addressed in this session. And we hope you, the viewer, will take the time to look over the actions of the 127th. You can do that by simply going onto our website at mainechamber.org or through your local and regional chambers as well. Or maybe it's an association that you're a part of that you have access to. Whatever the source of information, please take the time to do it. And if you find there are things in there that you like, please contact your representative or your senator and say thank you. They would appreciate hearing from you. They do represent you, and they want to represent you in the best way possible. At the same time, if there are concerns with what they've done or the actions they've taken, you have a responsibility as well to express those concerns. They want to hear those as well. You'd be surprised how few times our legislators will hear from people concerning the initiatives. They hear from the lobbyists, but they don't hear enough from you. Remember this, all good decisions in a legislative process deserve debate and thorough discussion. And yes, there's even room for conflict, so long as that conflict is about policy and not personalities. Also remember that worthwhile results depends on you and your opinion. It matters. Thank you so much. That's the bottom line for June and parts of July. We hope you've enjoyed it. We look forward to seeing you right back here, and we hope that you enjoy every sunny, beautiful day between now and then. With that, I thank you.